Welcome back to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. I'm Corey Olson, the Tolkien Professor, back again. Feels like forever since I've been here. So we only missed 2 weeks, but of course it was a week longer than I expected to miss because we missed the week before my vacation as well, due to a truly unfortunate illness. I'm telling you, you don't want to catch this like summer flu thing that's going around because it's pretty awful. But anyway, I'm back now and excited to return. It is session 112, of course. There we go. And we're going to finally get to meet Bilbo. We saw Bilbo last time, right? The stranger sitting in the corner, that kind of interesting little like recapitulation of Aragorn sitting in the corner, right? But now we're going to actually get to talk to Bilbo here tonight. But first, before we do, there were a bunch of comments on the discussion board. I didn't get a chance to talk about all of them here tonight. This was from Net, which I really appreciated, about the Elven seating arrangements. She really kind of brings together here some things that I'd been kind of wrestling with, but I didn't really think through them clearly enough, and I thought this was really good. So she says, a couple weeks ago, we were looking at the seating arrangements for the feast. I've been puzzling over this and have a couple points I'd like to add. A suitable chair, as well as meaning one suitable to his size, I've always taken to mean one in a suitable location to make Frodo feel at ease. He's not seated next to Elrond or Arwen in one of the places of highest honor. I've always pictured that he would be near the foot of the table. Still a place of dignity, but not one where he would feel conspicuously out of place. The seating arrangements seem to me unusual. Picturing the seating, it seems to be a blend of medieval and more modern, in our sense, practices. A medieval hall would be arranged high table, lord and lady in the middle looking out, with suitable guests and retainers arranged to the right and left in order of descending importance. A mid-18th century table would be head of household at the head, with the male members arranged to his right and left in descending order, lady at the foot, and the female members arranged to her right and left in descending order, with the 4 men and women of least importance, usually unmarried guests, meeting in the middle. A later and more familiar arrangement is head of household at the head, lady at the foot, with alternating sexes going round, still in order of descending importance. So you might have noticed, for instance, this is, if I'm recalling correctly, that last is the kind of seating arrangement that you would see on things like, wow, I'm suddenly blanking. Downton Abbey, that's what I was thinking of. But places where you see like early 20th century or late 19th century formal seating, right? Or like at a table arrangement, seating arrangements in a Jane Austen story or something like that. Anyway, okay. Elrond's seating does not fit any of these patterns, that she points out. What seems to be the arrangement is seating along both sides of the table, so there are some there that are sitting with their backs to the other guests in the hall. Presumably Glorfindel, seated at Elrond's right, is one of these. The foot of the table may be ceremonially empty, as Celebrian, the lady of the house, is absent. Arwen is not seated at the foot, as she is not the lady of the house, but instead placed in the middle as the unwed lady of the household. However, she is set back with a canopy, etc., reflecting her importance. The guests are then arranged in order of descending importance from Elrond. This is really great, and I really appreciate this. One of the things that is most Ned has really put her finger on here, I think, is how sort of mixed this is. Right, Arwen is seated like a medieval lady, really, right? With the canopy and everything, and she's seated in the middle of the table, presumably with her back to the wall, right? So that she is looking out over all of the guests, right? And again, that was the medieval model, with the lord and lady, their backs to the wall, and looking out over all of the guests, with nobody sitting on the other side of the table from them with their backs to the hall, right? Only the guests at the high table would only be facing outward towards the hall, and then everybody else sitting at tables also, the same kind of seating arrangement that you see at Hogwarts, for instance, right? The teacher's table is a high table in that medieval style, right? With the Hogwarts headmaster sitting in the middle, right? So Arwen's seating does look like that, right? But Elrond is sitting at the head of the table, which is a much more, as she says, a much more modern take, right? And usually assumes a table where you have people sitting on both sides. And indeed, that does explicitly from the text seem to be the case. Elrond is sitting at the end of the table, and he has somebody sitting on his right and his left. So she's right. Presumably, there are people on both sides of that table, which means that some of them have their backs to the rest of the guests. Now, one of the things that I think that this suggests to me is that there is. I'm not sure how confident I am in this conclusion, but it's one of my first thoughts anyway. Is that perhaps this suggests that the Elven, for all the fact that there does seem to be an order of precedence and everything here, as we discussed, I don't think that it seems at least very likely that it's a little bit more egalitarian, perhaps. Egalitarian in the sense of, there is the high table, clearly, right? It's Elrond's table, and Arwen is there, and the highest guests are seated there. But it's not separated. It's not set aside in the same way that the high table, at a medieval lord's feast would be, right? Where you have the one high table often set up on a dais, and everybody else down on the floor, like the house tables in Hogwarts, right? It doesn't seem to be set up like that. There doesn't seem to be, it seems to be instead several tables, all of which are kind of equal with people sitting down both sides of each of them, right? So there is no facing the room in the kind of magisterial way that the high table used to be set to face the room, right? Not the same level of sort of majesty, if you see what I mean. We don't get any sense here of somebody other than to a lesser degree Arwen, somebody sitting there and sort of looking out over the crowd, right, sort of somebody who is there and sort of surveying the room. Really, they're all at tables. And again, this is the most important table in the sense that the most important people are sitting at it, right? But doesn't seem to be set aside from the other tables in the same way. If it is, it's really weird to have people with their backs to the crowd, right? If it is a high table up on a dais and half of the, because if you did that, you couldn't even see Arwen, right? Because she'd be blocked by the wall of chair backs and the backs of people's heads, right? As they had that row of people. So it's just, that would be a really strange kind of arrangement. Now, Lincoln, I agree with you. I'm not at all trying to undermine the fact that there definitely is, Tolkien's world is not an egalitarian world, and I'm not trying to sort of make that argument exactly. What I am pointing out is just about the room itself and the tables themselves. So, okay, so let me. I don't know that there is a table that is up on a dais, right? I don't think it suggests that there is. And the seating arrangements, as Ned is pointing out, would seem to argue against that. But anyway, back to the other point, which I know you guys were really interested in, which is that Arwen's position, right? And what this sort of suggests about Arwen's position. Normally, as Ned points out, the foot of the table, you've got the lord of the house at the one end and the lady of the house at the other end. That's traditional. It doesn't mean necessarily that Tolkien would adopt that tradition. So I'm a little bit leery of drawing too many. I kind of like the idea that Celebrian is still considered the Lady of Rivendell, and so, her seat is being left empty in perpetuity, ever since she sailed for the West. That's kind of lovely. I have no problem with that idea. I'm just a little hesitant drawing that conclusion because it's super indirect, right? Or rather, I should say, that reading relies upon an assumption, or kind of almost a presumption, actually, that Tolkien is using that particular tradition. But I'm not confident making that assumption. And the reason I'm not confident is that we see so much variance, right? The Arwen thing and the canopy thing, like, nobody sits under a canopy. You see anybody in Downton Abbey sitting under a canopy, right? That doesn't happen. So it's clear that we're not just using, 18th or 19th century, formal arrangements wholesale, right? It's clearly there are alterations being made, and so therefore maybe it's not a thing. Maybe the foot of the table isn't empty. If the narrator had actually said that, right? If the narrator had actually pointed out that there was an empty seat at the foot of the table or something like that, then I'd be all over it, right? That reading, I mean. But I really don't see a very good. I really don't see a very good sort of justification for definitely concluding that. But as I say, I think it's a lovely idea. Okay, for Thoughtless, it does say it's up on a dais. That's really strange. Okay, that just makes it hard for me to imagine. Yeah, I couldn't remember if it had mentioned that or not. If it is, then what's up with that? It's just strange. It's a strange mixture. Because again, the seating on the one side of the table is designed for that. Right? It's designed for seating up on a dais. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just weird. I mean, maybe it's just weird, right? Maybe that's the conclusion. It's just an elf thing, and we don't understand. Maybe it's yeah. I don't really know. So. Yeah. Maybe it's Arwen's thing and not Elrond's. Yeah. Here's the thing that I then come back to. If it's up on a dais, Arwen is in the position that, like, the royal position, right? Now, you still can't get around the fact that it's weird that there are people sitting on the other side of the table. I could imagine Elrond not seating himself up in the middle for some reason, right? I don't know. It's such a strange half and half thing. So, Ned, I guess in some ways, thinking about it more, I'm like now more confused than I was before, perhaps. Darn it, for Thoughtless. I wasn't sure that the text explicitly said it was up on a dais. I kind of wish it didn't. If it didn't, it would make more sense to me. Oh, well. Yeah. Oh, well. Because that, without a dais, I can make sense of it. See, Tony, it sounds more like a round table-ish thing. Yeah, that's totally how I was preparing to read it, right? But no. Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. Harnath is just quoting it. There it is. Tormarthen, it is possible that there are people at the ends of the table with their backs to the room, but a gap in the middle so that Arwen isn't blocked. That I can see. That would make sense to me. It would seem to isolate Arwen in a kind of weird way, right? Because, of course, one of the purposes of having people seated on both sides of the table is to facilitate conversation across the table, right? So it'd be a little bit weird for Arwen alone to have no interlocutor, right? To have no, there's like this cleared space so that everyone can behold her, but she has nobody to talk to except for the people on either side. And even there, she's sitting in this canopy affair, right? So it would be sort of isolating. And it would look a little bit strange. I mean, if I would think, right? I mean, so here's Glorfindel, right? Seated at Elrond's right-hand side, which is on the one hand, the seat of great honor, right? At the right hand of Elrond. And on the other hand, like really kind of strange as he's like one of the only people sitting with his back to the whole rest of the room, right? In some ways, if there isn't a whole row of people, down to Glorfindel's right, it makes it even weirder, right? I mean, wouldn't you feel I'd feel really self-conscious being there, like, sitting in that seat. I'm not really sure. Yeah, we need to do a reenactment. Yeah, okay. Let's reenact this seating arrangement. I agree. Maybe we'll do this. So they were talking at Middlemoot that we needed to do. We did remember that was our first reenactment was at Middlemoot last year when we did our reenactment of the attack on Weathertop. Can you believe it was only a year ago that we were all the way back on Weathertop? But anyway, so we'll. I know that feels like forever ago, Bongsman, doesn't it? But yeah, that was 1 year ago in August, or October rather, that we did the Weathertop stabbing reenactment. We're talking about doing another reenactment this year, but I'm like, I don't know what else we have to reenact, but I think maybe we found it. Maybe we have found it. We will attempt perhaps to reenact the seating arrangements in Elrond's house because now I'm just confused. So, but anyway, Ned, I still want to thank you for clarifying some things and really kind of drawing the terms out much more clearly. So, all right, let's move on quick. First, before we move on back to the text, I forgot to do announcements because it's been 3 weeks, and so I forget how to do everything. Just a couple quick announcements. First, the fall semester at Signum starts on Monday, so it is almost time for the fall semester to begin. So just as a reminder for folks, there's still time to sign up if you haven't signed up yet, and if you want to audit our new course on Germanic legends and everything, there's plenty of opportunity, or want to participate as a discussion auditor in any of our other courses, then you're welcome to do that. But as I say, classes start on Monday. It's still technically possible to sign up to jump into the courses for a couple weeks after that, but obviously easier to begin at the beginning with everybody else. So that's this coming Monday. We do have the next Mythgard movie club is Watership Down. We're going to discuss the new Netflix Watership Down series on September 5th. So Thursday, September 5th, we'll be talking about Watership Down. I've been excited to talk about this series since Christmas, which is when it came out. I remember it came out on Christmas Day, which I think was a terrible idea because I was like... or Christmas Eve, maybe. Anyway, whatever. It was an awful idea whenever it was, because I was like stuck at, my mom's house all day long with the extended family, like waiting until I didn't, and then binging it when I got home at like 11 o'clock at night. But anyway, so really excited to talk about Watership Down. And as I said, it's going to be Thursday, September 5th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And a reminder about our two moots that are coming up. Middle Moot and New England Moot, both happening. New England Moot happening on the 29th of September. And Middle Moot, of course, which I was just mentioning, happening on October the 12th out in Iowa. New England Moot being located in Amherst, Massachusetts. You can go to signumuniversity.org/events and find the information for all of these. And in particular, wanted to emphasize that the call for papers for both are still open, but they're only open for about another couple weeks. So do urge you to get get into that. So, all right, cool. So I almost forgot to do that, but did not totally forget. So that's good. All right, let us jump back into the text then. All right, so we've just saw Bilbo sitting in the corner. Elrond went forward and stood beside the silent figure. "Awake, little master," he said with a smile. Then turning to Frodo, he beckoned to him. "Now at last the hour has come that you have wished for, Frodo," he said. "Here is a friend that you have long missed." The dark figure raised its head and uncovered its face. "Bilbo!" cried Frodo with sudden recognition, and he sprang forward. "Hullo, Frodo, my lad," said Bilbo. "So you have got here at last. I hoped you would manage it. Well, well, so all this feasting is in your honor, I hear. I hope you enjoyed yourself." "Why weren't you there?" cried Frodo. "And why haven't I been allowed to see you before?" "Because you were asleep. I have seen a good deal of you. I have sat by your side with Sam each day. But as for the feast, I don't go in for such things much now, and I had something else to do." All right. Lots, of course, to talk about here. Our first reunion back with Bilbo again. And yeah, so New England Moot is on the website, by the way. Just wanted to clarify that. It is on the events page. New England Moot is there's totally a page for that. So just wanted to make sure people have been signing up, been getting registrations already. Registration open for both, actually, Middle Moot and New England Moot. So just wanted to emphasize that. Okay. So, yeah, several people commenting on the bizarre lack of interest in feasts by Bilbo, right? Couple things that I would emphasize here. One is that I just a general caution, which I've given on many other occasions as well. The associations between hobbits and food, which is so prominent in the mind of modern Tolkien readers, is, I think, a little exaggerated. It was something that, the film did really fun things with, right? And that helped in some ways. But hobbits aren't all about food. It's less of, I'm not saying there's nothing there, right? I'm not saying that there's no sources of the ideas that people have about hobbits and food. I'm not saying it comes from nowhere, but I am saying that it's, I do think that people tend to exaggerate that or sort of isolate that element of hobbitdom, right, and give it a to me, I think, slightly disproportionately large emphasis. It's just not, I think, we don't get that many references to it in the text, right? I mean, we get some in talking about Hobbit culture and everything. Yeah, exactly, Lady Schmabulok. Food is part of their culture, but not the main thing about their culture. Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Their culture certainly does not revolve around food. No. And even, I think about some of the sort of the fun passages in the film, right? Where, in the films that this was, where this came up, right? There are some of them which I actually find a little bit vexing from a textual standpoint, right? And my least favorite is the Weathertop one, right? Where, like, Merry and Pippin and Sam give them away to the enemy because they were, frying things on the open fire, right? They were, and I don't know, I mean, it works in several ways in the film, but again, it's just like the idea that they are so caught up in, making, nice, tasty bacon that they, like, lose track of their dangerous, the danger that they're in and stuff. It's just, it doesn't really work. And they do have tomatoes, Tony, which is an issue, I know. But anyway, it's just not, it makes me think of that. So the Zimmerman script, so this guy, right, was going to do a film adaptation and sent the manuscript, or, what do you call it? Screenplay, right, to Tolkien, to comment on. There was this one place, and it was in Isengard, at the scene where Merry and Pippin are reunited to the rest of them. And the filmmaker wanted to have them eating really long sandwiches, like enormous, subs or hoagies or whatever. Which Tolkien thought was ridiculous, right? And he made this really derisive comment about, why, that it was just completely ridiculous that they'd be eating really long sandwiches. And he expressed, he expressed huge, confusion. Like, he could not even understand what on earth the person was thinking of, Zimmerman. Like, what possibly could impel you to want to give them comically long sandwiches? And the thing is, I think that, Zimmerman was seeing the same thing that many other people do. Like, he was sort of catching that same spirit. And when he wanted to have a little comic relief, he wanted to give them a little comic relief by having them eating enormous sandwiches, right? So anyway, it's, anyway, long and the short of it is, I don't think that it is, we need necessarily see it as super deviant that Bilbo doesn't go in much for feasts anymore, especially if we think that the quantities of food involved would be his primary motivations to attend a feast, right? Now, we are told, as someone was reminding us early on, that he is still punctual for meals, right? It's not like he doesn't eat anymore. He's not like, Ransom and that hideous strength subsisting only on wine and bread anymore. I mean, he goes to meals, right? He enjoys meals, but feasts, he doesn't go in for feasts. I don't go in for such things much now, he says. So yeah. Now, JJ, I agree, feasts are far more than merely food. And in some ways it's interesting. In fact, it makes it seem even more odd, right, that he wouldn't go in for those, right? You'd think if he attended any meals, the feasts would be polite to attend the feasts, right? Like, you guys are getting together to celebrate a special occasion. Yeah, whatever. I'm skipping that, right? I can't be bothered. Would seem to be slightly aggressively, impolite at worst, right? Inconsiderate, right? Indelicate kind of approach to things. Anyway, it's just sort of interesting, right? So sort of interesting to see that he doesn't do this. Now, I agree, he does have an excuse, Biotrom. You're right. Villar says he's old enough to not care about offending people. Yeah, though, I mean, it's kind of hard to play the old person card in Rivendell, right? But nevertheless, I guess once you're well past 11D1, right? When you're starting to push 130, maybe you feel like you can play it anyway. Yeah. Yeah, JJ says, as someone who enjoys a dinner party with friends but can't stand large events like wedding banquets, I can sort of sympathize. Yes, and JJ, that actually is the way that I take it, right? That he is not into big ceremonial, he's not into the pomp right? Of these and that, he doesn't want to be in the big crowded room and at the long table, right? He and he does have other things that he would rather be doing. So yeah. Now, Crownless, I agree. We do have his birthday party, right? Oh, hey, sorry, Storied Past, welcome. I've been watching on Twitter, of course, as you've been catching up. So congratulations on catching up. That's great. I'm glad you could join us. Anyway, I mean, there are the two factors here, right? The one is that Bilbo has something else to do. The other, maybe that he's a little more introverted now than he used to be. Yeah, exactly, Lady Shmebiwak. I'm tempted to read it that way. I am. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, but, and I had something else to do. The thing is, I mean, how urgent was that, really? As somebody who has done a certain amount of last-second prep before a performance, I can readily believe that he, feels that he wants to perform this poem tonight after the feast, and so, he can't afford to actually go to the feast. That's also perfectly legit. Tony thinks that it's also Bilbo being cheeky, which is quite possible. And Tony, that was the reading that I was just going to suggest, because especially if you go back to what Elrond has just said to him. Awake, little master, is the part that I'm particularly interested in, because there are a couple ways in which you can take that. And I'm thinking of Little Master in particular. Little Master. One usage of that phrase is like that's what you would call the 3-year-old child of, a noble or wealthy family. Right? Oh, there's the little master, right? I don't think that's necessarily how Elrond means it, right? But I can't help but think that one way or the other, what he's saying there is kind of teasing, right? If he means master in a much more respectful, like they call Tom Bombadil master, or even in the respectful way, Tony, as you point out, that he calls the gaffer Master Hamfast, right? Even if you take master in that way, to be calling him little, I mean, he is little. Like, I'm not saying he's not, right? But still, it's... my objection isn't, and I want to make sure it's clear. I don't have any objections. My comment is not about the significance of calling him master. My comment is on the word little, right? I mean, there's no way in which it is impossible for me to read that as purely flattering, right? As just a polite form of expression by Elrond. I'm not saying Elrond is being rude. I'm not saying Elrond's being a jerk. I'm saying exactly, Matt. I'm saying that Elrond is trying out some hobbitry. I'm saying that Elrond has been around Bilbo for long enough to know not only the way that Bilbo talks to other people, but also how Bilbo appreciates being talked to, right? Yes, so I do think that Awake Little Master is teasing him, and possibly in two different ways, both by addressing him as Little Master and possibly by saying awake in the first place. He seems to be asleep, right? Maybe he is and maybe he's not, as he's going to argue. But one way or another, I think that this seems like a good-natured piece of of teasing, of hobbitry on Elrond's part. So when Bilbo responds and says, presumably still in the hearing of Elrond, right? He and Frodo, Frodo then leaps forward and the two of them are talking, but Elrond is still standing, right? There's no reason to think that Elrond isn't still hearing this, right? So, for him to, say, as for the feast, I don't go in for such things much now. And I had something else to do. Could be just as we insult our friends, in order to show our affection, maybe this is a deliberate piece of impoliteness by Bilbo towards Elrond. Again, in that same kind of friendly tone, and maybe in a sense to get back at him for the "awake little master" comment earlier on. Yes, Tony, I too imagine Elrond standing aside and laughing while observing the reunion. I think this is a fun exchange for everybody. And certainly, Elrond's second statement, "Awake, little master," he said with a smile. Then turning to Frodo, he beckoned to him, right? So he makes this gesture, right? "Now at last the hour has come that you have wished for, Frodo. Here is a friend that you have long missed," he says, with all of the air and tone of somebody pulling back a curtain, right? Or whisking off a cover or something, right? To reveal the surprise that's been awaiting. Smiling fondly, Iwendilian, absolutely, sure. JJ says, "Fine, just for that, I'm going to sing a song about your dad." Yeah, well, I mean, Bilbo is also, preparing his own, bit of cheek for later on. It's a different thing, right? But anyway, certainly, yeah, exactly. There is some pageantry. There is some formality there, Valori. I agree with that. But again, I think that the tone is friendly. This is all about fun. This is all about joy. This is all about friendship in every direction here. And Elrond, I think, is really included in that. And so, to me, it's very charming to think that Elrond and Bilbo, that their relationship has elevated to the level of banter, right? I mean, that seems to be a good thing. And honestly, I don't know that I would expect any less of Bilbo, right? Yeah. Good. Tony, I could easily believe that Elrond does a mean tra-la-la-lolly. I bet he takes a turn. Why not? Good. I love Bilbo's first sentence to Frodo. "So you have got here at last," he says. I just love that. Wonderful thing to say to someone whose bedside you've been sitting at, right? Who barely survived, who, made it to Rivendell under the most perilous and adverse circumstances of anybody ever coming to Rivendell, right? And "So you've got here at last." Now, of course, he's also saying you've got here, like, to this room at last, like, you waited, sat around long enough at the feast, didn't you? Right? I've been sitting here waiting for ages. Both of those meanings, I think, to "you have got here at last" seem to me to apply. Yeah, exactly, Mike. I'm thinking of it both ways there. But anyway, yeah, I think. Storied Past, that's a really wonderful point. Storied Past is recalling in the Jackson film when Aragorn reaches Helm's Deep after dying, or practically everybody thinks he's dead, right? And Legolas's words on seeing him are, "You look terrible," right? I actually really like that too. There's it it doesn't quite capture the pure hobbitry. But it's close, right? I mean, again, in general, I sort of like the attitude there. But anyway, yeah, I really like that. So you have got here at last. I hoped you would manage it. I hoped you would manage it. Again, what a wonderful way to sort of downplay the horrible danger and anxiety, right? I hoped you would manage it, right? But, you did fine. Well. So all this feasting is in your honor. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Oh man, Green Great Dragon says, I hope he's not talking to the ring. What when he said, so you have got here at last? Yeah, no, I don't think he's talking to the ring. That is a super creepy idea. Yeah, super creepy idea. But I don't think so. Yeah. But absolutely, yeah. These are very Hobbit kind of understatements, Tony. Absolutely. But Lori says it's like Midwesterners saying hello. Yeah. Yeah. Frodo's questions. Why weren't you there? Very sensible question. And why haven't I been allowed to see you before? Of course, the most interesting word, I think, in that sentence is allowed, right? Why haven't, Frodo's immediate response is, why have I been prevented? Surely, why wasn't I taken here right away, right? And exactly, Tony. It was a conspiracy, right? This does suggest some kind of conspiracy, perhaps. Though Bilbo's response is straightforward enough because you were asleep. I've seen a good deal of you, right? Notice how Bilbo immediately deflects this by kind of teasing back at Frodo, right? Well, if you haven't seen me, it's not my fault, right? It's your fault. Who's the one who was sleeping this whole time, right? You, not me. That's why you haven't seen me. I've seen a good deal of you. I have sat by your side with Sam each day. So Bilbo does assure Frodo, I haven't just been neglecting you. It's not that I couldn't be bothered, right? I have seen you. You haven't seen me yet. So, but of course that he's also sort of not answering Frodo. Frodo knows. He's not asking why wasn't I seeing you while I was comatose, right? He's asking, why wasn't I taken to you right away? Like, everybody knew that I, would have wanted to see you as soon as I woke up and was up. Why, why didn't Gandalf run and fetch you right away when we were, instead of having this long conversation with me, right? Yeah. So, the Frodo's question would seem to be, why has it been so many hours since I have been out of bed and no one even told me that you were here? And there, of course, that seems to be the conspiracy, right? But Bilbo's not apologizing, right? And not sort of blaming it. It seems clear that it was a surprise, that they have arranged this surprise. Elrond's elaborate introduction shows that he's clearly in on it, right? Everybody has been waiting for this moment, and they've arranged it for Frodo so that it is like the culmination of the feast, right? It's like the final, the gift at the end of the feast in his honor, right? And even the question there, so all this feasting is in your honor, I hear. I hope you enjoyed yourself, right? Had he been reunited with Bilbo at the feast, he wouldn't have been thinking about anything else, right? He probably wouldn't even have noticed Arwen sitting there. But anyway, yeah. So exactly, Mike suggests a double purpose, right? A fun surprise for Frodo, and Bilbo gets to finish his poem. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good. That's a really interesting point, Fourth Dauntless. Fourth Dauntless is saying, With Gandalf and Elrond in on this surprise, it makes me wonder if the feast and the celebration in the Hall of Fire are part of Frodo's healing. Friendship and cheer to drive out the despair in Frodo's heart. Yeah, no, he doesn't seem real despairing when he wakes up, right? Despair doesn't seem to be that present of an issue anymore. I mean, which of course just suggests that things are going well. But I think it's a really interesting suggestion, Fourth Dauntless, right? Remember Elrond, who is, you know, pulling aside the curtain here, right, on the surprise. You know, he's the one flicking on the white switch for the surprise party, right? He is also Frodo's doctor, right? So you know, it's certainly part of the overall sort of atmosphere. I think that, you know, it's wholesome and cheerful sort of friendship. Yeah. Biotrom suggests he's increasing the joy step by step and not all at once. Maybe. Yeah. Now, MJ Nairn on the Twitch chat was asking, why did Aragorn never mention it? A great question. Does Aragorn have, does he know that? I can't imagine that when Aragorn meets Frodo in Bree, right, with the Black Riders right outside town and everything else that they have to worry about then, and then walking through the wilderness, that he's first and foremost focused on the conspiracy to give Frodo a happy surprise when they get to Rivendell, right? But similarly, I also can't imagine that his primary focus is on chatting about Bilbo either. And, you know, yeah, so I think that he's not thinking about Bilbo and Frodo's reunion. I think he's but he's not, he doesn't, why should he talk about Bilbo? Why should it come up? What's the reason for it coming up? And Fourth Dauntless, you're right. He says, no telling when Aragorn was last in Rivendell. Bilbo might not even be there right now, for all he knows. Yeah, no, I mean, he probably can assess the fact that Bilbo has taken up more or less permanent residence in Rivendell. So I doubt he suspects that Bilbo has departed. But I think that it doesn't seem to me that odd that it never came up. And if you're wondering, wouldn't he maybe use that as a piece of encouragement to help keep up Frodo's spirits when that seemed to be an important issue on the journey? Right? Hey, you know, your Uncle Bilbo, let's get to Rivendell because your Uncle Bilbo's waiting for you. I mean, yeah, I can kind of see that, but at the same time, that doesn't seem to me to be necessarily, a good move, a clear move. Their motivation to get to Rivendell, not the problem, right? They're keeping up their hope is more the issue. And hey, Bilbo's in Rivendell doesn't seem to me to be calculated to do that. JJ points out that Bilbo could be dead by then. Sure. I mean, yeah, he's quite old, right? So Aragorn might consider it imprudent to make promises that he doesn't know for sure, right, what the status of them is. And Mike also points out that Aragorn as Strider is in secret keeping mode. No, I mean, that also, why doesn't he mention Bilbo? Again, why should he? Gandalf established his credentials, right? I guess it just doesn't seem to me that odd that it would never come up. Aragorn is it's an intense time, even though it lasts for several weeks. It's still a rather intense time, and Aragorn is rather focused on the time at hand. Now, MJ Nairn points out that he does imply that he knew Bilbo. I don't think that he's concealed the fact that he knew Bilbo, because as MJ points out, he says he never knew that Bilbo translated the poem about Gilgalad. When Sam says that Bilbo wrote the Gilgalad poem that Sam recites, Aragorn says he didn't make it up, right? He must have translated it. I never knew that, right? So he's certainly not being all like Bilbo who, right? So I don't see any reason to think, I don't know, like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if it never came up. I would equally don't think that, is there concrete reason to believe that he never said he knew Bilbo? Right? I mean, he might have done. He might easily have done. Yeah. Catriona points out that he knows that the land may have ears, and it's not a good idea to broadcast Bilbo's whereabouts when the enemy may overhear somehow. Yeah, sure. No, Strider in secret-keeping mode. Exactly. Yeah, so revealing information to Frodo, even information which might seem innocuous. I agree, Catriona, it's a really good point, that the whereabouts of Bilbo Baggins, who is being hunted for by the enemy, is perhaps not a topic for idle conversation. Yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah, Edith Eldora is wondering if maybe Aragorn assumed that Frodo knew Bilbo was in Rivendell, so he wouldn't even say it. Maybe. Yeah. No, I'm sort of inclining more and more to that way of thinking, Carita, that the whereabouts of any given Baggins is strict need to know, and Frodo doesn't need to know. Yeah, sure. Okay. Hey, let's do another slide. What were you doing? Frodo asks, very naturally. Why, sitting and thinking. I do a lot of that nowadays, and this is the best place to do it in as a rule. Wake up indeed, he said, cocking an eye at Elrond. There was a bright twinkle in it, and no sign of sleepiness that Frodo could see. Wake up. I was not asleep, Master Elrond. If you want to know, you have all come out of your feast too soon, and you have disturbed me, in the middle of making up a song. I was stuck over a line or two and was thinking about them, but now I don't suppose I shall ever get them right. There will be such a deal of singing that the ideas will be driven clean out of my head. I shall have to get my friend the Dunedain to help me. Where is he? Elrond laughed. He shall be found, he said. Then you two shall go into a corner and finish your task, and we will hear it and judge it before we end our merrymaking. Messengers were sent to find Bilbo's friend, though none knew where he was or why he had not been present at the feast. Good. So, Storied Past is asking, would that imply that Bilbo wasn't allowed to write to Frodo to tell him his whereabouts? You know, the post is not exactly secure. Not only we know the post is not super punctual into the Shire from outside, right? We've already encountered that. But yeah, you know, I bet Gandalf would, and that Gandalf and Elrond both would probably have counseled against Bilbo writing letters to Frodo, which could be lost or intercepted, or keeping both Bagginses where the good guys know where they are and the bad guys don't know where they are, is, I think, clearly part of Gandalf's strategy here. Yeah. And Mike, I agree. I also get the feeling that there wasn't a lot of idle chit-chat on the trip. In fact, Mike, the only idle chit-chat that we hear about, Strider squashes on, right? We do hear the hobbits chit-chatting among themselves, and the times that we get are Strider telling them to shut it. So, yeah. That's why I don't find it hard to believe that it never came up, right? But yes, Galandar, the issue going the other way, right? Not just worrying about the discovery of Bilbo, but thinking about Bilbo's relationship with the ring, right? Frodo, we know that Gandalf is concerned. Frodo has the ring now. Bilbo gave it up to Frodo. Gandalf says, as far as I know, Bilbo alone in history has ever actually done it, right? Which means they don't know what the long-term effects are going to be. They don't know, is he going to go through withdrawal, right? Is there going to be, what would be the impact? And now, like, encouraging Bilbo to write letters to his nephew might seem innocuous enough, right? But there's some pretty good reasons to think, maybe a clean break is healthiest for everybody, right? That doesn't seem to me to be a big stretch. Exactly. He's been in ring bearer rehab for a while, Lady Schmebulok, and you don't encourage them to, stay in touch with the bartenders, right? No, seriously, that makes a lot of sense to me as well. The sitting and thinking comment is another reason why I'm thinking that he's kind of teasing Elrond here, right? I don't go in for such things much now, and I had something else to do, right? I had something which I had a previous appointment which took precedence over your feast, right? The urgent business of sitting and thinking, right? I couldn't be bothered to attend the it's like worse than rearranging my sock drawer, right? I had to sit and think. Yeah. And then he says, you've all come out of your feast too soon, right? After saying, in that, his first sentence, so you have got here at last, it sounds like he could be saying, like, boy, you took your sweet time at the feast, right? And now he's saying, you guys came out too early, right? You've disturbed me, and now, here I was enjoying having this room to myself, and now, here goes the neighborhood. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not saying that rearranging your sock drawer is not a super important task. I don't mean to imply that. Anyway. I've never been 100% sure what to do with the sentence, there was a bright twinkle in it and no sign of sleepiness that Frodo could see. That is, was he asleep? Because, so there are a few options here, right? Option number one, Bilbo was not asleep at all, right? Elrond knew he wasn't asleep. He was just thinking, right? He was leaning back there and his head was down as if he were sleeping, but really he was in a deep meditative state, contemplating his art, right? Thinking about his poetry. I'm not going to say that's impossible. I mean, I know how my deep meditative states end within 5 minutes if I were to assume that particular posture and think deep thoughts in that particular way. However, the narrator seems to suggest, or rather Frodo's impression, is that there's no sign of sleepiness in his eyes. So he wasn't asleep? We're buying this? Frodo's buying? So Frodo seems to buy it. Are we meant to buy it as well? Johannes, I agree. Frodo does know him, right? It is also possible that he's been caught sleeping in here before and they're still teasing him about it. I don't know. Yeah, Forthala says, I'm perpetually skeptical of Bilbo's truthfulness here, but I have no evidence to support my skepticism. yeah, the tone of this entire exchange leads me to be dubious of like almost anything that anybody says, right? I mean, everyone is clearly joking and teasing here. And so what Bilbo says is exactly what he would say, if he had been asleep, right? Whether he's asleep or not, that's what he's going to say, especially in response to awake little master, right? He's responding explicitly to the wake up indeed, right? He's responding explicitly to the awake part, right? But I think he's implicitly replying to the little master part as well. So yeah, so Trifle says that I'm going to go with Frodo doesn't know if Bilbo's joking or not, as well. Yes. And here's another thing. Frodo does know Bilbo, but Frodo hasn't seen Bilbo for 17 years, and in the last 17 years, Bilbo has been changing since he does not have the ring. Now, yeah. So yeah, Jez, I do think the narrator would leave us feeling dubious. Yeah, no, I don't have any problem imagining that. And if we get back to, the narrator question, right? That is the question of who is narrating this section. I'm saying Frodo. This is a Frodo piece. And imagining Frodo as narrator makes it even more likely, it seems to me, right? That Frodo as narrator would be highlighting the kind of banter and joking tone and kind of uncertainty of the whole thing. Bilbo is at least playing it off pretty well, right? The bright twinkle in his eye, right? Either means he wasn't asleep, or he was and he's passing it off really well. At the very least, he's being very sort of witty and vivacious at the moment, right? See, Johanna says it's the no sign of sleepiness that Frodo could see that seems to him like an odd thing to emphasize if it's not meant to tell us something. I agree. But notice what it doesn't say. It is odd, right? But that's exactly the oddness that makes me question it, actually. If what the narrator was trying to tell us is 100% Bilbo was not asleep, if that's the point, then he could just tell us that. Or he could be more direct than he is. He's being indirect in that statement, right? He doesn't have to just tell us that Frodo cannot see any signs of sleepiness. He could just tell us there were no signs of sleepiness. He doesn't say that. He says instead that there was no sign of sleepiness in his eye that Frodo could see, right? He could just say Bilbo didn't look sleepy, but he doesn't say that. He says that Frodo didn't think that Bilbo looked sleepy, right? So what we're getting is an emphasis placed on Frodo's perception of Bilbo, right? Yeah. So, yes, and Kate, I think that's a really important point. One of the sort of bigger picture conclusions to draw from the whole tone and shape of this discussion that's happening here, both to Frodo and triangularly, right, involving Elrond out of the corner of his eye as well, right, does establish Bilbo as being totally at home in Rivendell, right? Bilbo is not just a guest, right? He is not, merely a lodger. He is at home here. He is accepted by Elrond, and he accepts Elrond and treats Elrond like a friend, like Gandalf. Gandalf is the only non-Hobbit that we've yet seen anybody acting this way with. Remember when we were talking about that scene with the stone troll, right? The scene when Aragorn was trolling the hobbits, remember? When we were talking about the joking there and how he teases Merry and Pippin, how Aragorn teases Merry and Pippin, in that the whole setup with the in the stone troll's glade. Is a really interesting sign, right? One of the first signs that we get of this real kind of camaraderie growing among them, right? But here we're seeing that already well established with Elrond himself, right? To show that this is not Bilbo is not just tolerated. He's not treated merely politely, and he's even understood to the extent that he is being treated like he likes to. He has been treated as a friend, like he likes to treat his friends. So yeah, I agree. Matt emphasizes he's not only at home, but he is an intimate with the great and good of Rivendell. This is no mean thing, given that Elrond is held in awe by all of Gondor. Yeah, absolutely. It is a big deal. It is a big deal, but it also shows, it tells us something about Bilbo, but it does tell us something, I think, about Elrond as well, right? Don't forget the tra-la-la-lolly, right? This is not a stiff house. This is not the house, remember, always first and foremost was homely, right? And it is still homely in that sense. Yeah. Tora Marthin likens it to saying, me and King Arthur were pals, right? Yeah, it is a little bit like that. Biotrom says, is this whole chapter from Frodo's perspective? Yes, so far, with the possible exception of that one paragraph on Arwen, which we were opining is totally Finnegan, King's Rider. Still love that theory, but absolutely. Yeah, exactly, Green Great Dragon. He's as kind as Christmas or as summer, depending on your edition. Yeah, he is kind. Absolutely. You have disturbed me in the middle of making up a song. There's a little pause there. You have disturbed me in the middle of making up a song. He pauses there, right, as if to sort of leave that, you've disturbed me. I mean, if he just stopped there, if he'd put a period at that point, right, that would have been seriously rude. Oh, seriously? Come on, I thought I booked this room for sitting and thinking, right? Now you go, oh man, right? But so he draws it out there, right? He comes up to that. You have disturbed me in the middle of making up a song, right? I'm telling you what I was doing, the urgent business that I had that kept me from the feast. I was stuck over a line or two and was thinking about them, but now I don't suppose I shall ever get them right. I think, by the way, that Bilbo is also engaging in a little bit of constructive preemptive sabotage here, right? Notice how he is already contextualizing the performance that I'm sure he knows he's going to give later on, right? He has said, I was in the middle of making up. I've been sitting here just kind of making some stuff up, right? Yeah, I've kind of tossed off a few lines. I was in the middle of that, right? There's one or two lines, though, that I'm not quite sure about. So you notice what he's done? He's contextualized the poetry performance he's going to give later on as a practically extemporaneous performance, right? So if it doesn't go well, it can be like, well, I was just making this up during the feast, right? And then he also says, yeah, there's some I was stuck over a line or two and was thinking about them, but now I don't suppose I shall ever get them right. Right. But yeah, so if there's like big flaws in the song that I'm going to sing, well, it's your fault, right? And what could be expected under the circumstances, right? It's kind of interesting. And I think here, what I'm hearing here is that Bilbo knows that the poem he's going to recite later is a big deal. And it's a big deal. We know that this meter, this structure that that Tolkien used in this errantry poem is the only time he ever wrote in this model. And so, I mean, the piece is a very impressive piece, and it's quite long. Pretty sure it's the longest poem. I know Galadriel's poem seems longer. That's because it's given twice in English and in Quenya. But anyway, so he's... I think it's pretty clear that Eärendil was a mariner is a piece which Bilbo has composed quite carefully for some time and prepared, even possibly with this evening in mind, right? But now he's just trying to toss it off, right? As to pass it off as this spontaneous piece of versifying that he just did, which is flawed, and now I'll never get that right. Yeah. But now I agree, Valori, that stopping in mid-writing is maddening, and Tolkien is probably drawing on personal experience there, no doubt. Yes, Matt, exactly. It is like the Coleridge Gambit. Yes, the Kubla Khan story. But at the same time, this is a kind of thing that we see Tolkien doing all the time, right? Not in exactly these terms, but in this kind of a way. Remember that the number of times that Tolkien introduces a poem that he puts into the text by saying, Aragorn did this, right? With the Beren and Luthien poem, right? Where he's like, yeah, this is hard to render in the common speech, right? So he's like, this was just a clumsy attempt at spontaneous translation on my part, and of course, again, it's an enormously intricate English poem, right? So, yeah, and think of when Tolkien as narrator does this too, when he tells us that, this is, something like the song that they were singing can't be captured, right? But this poem is like a glimpse of what they were singing, right? We've seen this kind of movement before. Bilbo seems to be doing that same kind of thing, right? Exactly that same kind of thing, and by which I conclude not that he is self-conscious about the poem that he's going to sing, not that he's insecure about the poem, but almost the opposite, actually. From this, I conclude that Bilbo must be especially proud of the poem that he's going to sing, right? That's why he's kind of downplaying it in this way. Yeah. And Belangsmond, yeah, the entire books themselves are a translation from the Red Book. Yeah, even I agree. Even the way that he chooses the story, the story of the story, right? So that this version of the story that we have, the book that we're actually reading, is only a translation of a copy of a translation of. So it's so far removed from like the real original, right? Which would have been so much better than this, right? So any flaws that this story might have, or any bits of the novel that, the book that you're reading, which doesn't appeal to you, it's probably just forgive the modern compiler who did the best he could, right? Yeah. Exactly. Yes, JJ, it's the reverse of the Princess Bride, which had to be condensed to the good parts. Yes. Yes. And I have to admit, it's one of the things in the frame story of the Princess Bride, the book, not the movie, which I find. And actually, JJ, until you just said that, I didn't even realize it. But you've exactly put your finger on one of the things that always felt awkward to me about that. Because I'm expecting the Tolkien move, right? To have him say the original was terrible, right? And needed to be livened up and just the good parts put in. Put. I mean, it's funny, but it strikes me as strange in that way. Anyway, yeah. Matt, it is like the medieval humility trope. Yeah, I mean that of course was very common, and I think that we can see Bilbo doing a similar thing here. It's not exactly the same. Again, he's sort of contextualizing it, preparing against failure, right, or against ill reception of the poem that he's going to be doing. But like I said, to me, this betrays the fact that he's especially eager. He's feeling perhaps especially protective of or invested in this poem. Anyway, okay. There will be such a deal of singing that the ideas will be driven clean out of my head. I shall have to get my friend the Dunedain to help me. Where is he? Elrond laughingly says he shall be found. Then you two shall go into a corner and finish your task, and we will hear it and judge it before we end our merrymaking. I suspect that Elrond saying we shall hear it and judge it before we end our merrymaking, here again, just in the tone of this whole conversation, I can hear two things there, right? First, I can hear there's like both a serious and a joking thing that Elrond is doing there, right? The judge it, I think, is teasing Bilbo, right? I think that he gets what Bilbo is doing. I think he sees through Bilbo here. Bilbo has said, oh yeah, I was just making up some lines and they're not very good and I still need some help, but, whatever, maybe I'll toss them out later and see what you think, right? Elrond's not buying it. Elrond, I think, knows Bilbo too well for this. And so he says, oh, we shall hear it and judge it. Right. So like, no, I'm gonna increase the pressure. Right. I'm not gonna let you get away with that. I'm not gonna let you get away with that. Like, oh yeah, no, this is just extemporaneous. Right. Yeah, we'll judge it. But also, I think at the same time that he's teasing him by sort of reversing that deflection of pressure, right? I think that he's also acknowledging that this is a big deal to Bilbo. He sees this. He knows this, right? He knows he hears what Bilbo is saying. Bilbo really means, I have prepared a special poem that I think quite a lot of, and I want to share it with you guys tonight. And Elrond is saying, great, we look forward to hearing it, right? While both of them are, neither one of them being serious, right, in the things that they're actually saying about it. Yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah, Mike, I agree. If there's no teasing tone there at all, the judge it feels weird, right? Like, seriously? Is that how we act at Rivendell? Like, yeah, you can join us, right? Sing a song, but we're going to like hold up cards afterwards. Be like, oh, that was only an 8.7. Yeah, it does feel weird. But again, I think in the context, there's been so much teasing going on. That's definitely how I hear it there. Yeah, good. Yeah, Brunir, I definitely think that Elrond has become Hobbit-like in his teasing. Yeah, or at least he knows how to relate to Bilbo. He connects with Bilbo this way. Um, so Biotrom says, I get why Bilbo would say my friend the Dunedain, but why does the narrator say Bilbo's friend and not Aragorn? The narrator clearly knows who Bilbo's friend is. I think we have seen this happen before, right? Where even Frodo as narrator is trying to convey the experience, not just tell what happened, but to try to convey the experience of being there, right? And his experience, Frodo's experience, is one of surprise a couple times, right? First, he's surprised by Bilbo, and he's going to be surprised when Bilbo's friend shows up and it's Strider, right? So the narrator says to find Bilbo's friend, because Frodo doesn't hear whom they're going, or doesn't hear anything, doesn't hear Aragorn's name, and he's going to be surprised, and so our surprise is also preserved in that way. Yeah. Is Bilbo being, JJ's asking, is Bilbo being afforded a particular honor here, or is it open mic night in Rivendell? Both, I think. It is, I mean, I assume that the Hall of Fire is sort of open mic, an open mic kind of situation. But I think that, again, by saying we will hear it and judge it, in addition to teasing him, right, and implying they're going to be really harsh, and we're going to put on our sternest, poetic criticism expressions when you're speaking. In addition to that, he's also saying we're going to pay special attention. Like when you want to do your poem, you've got the floor. Right, I think is also another thing, and again, that seems to me very complimentary on Frodo's part. Yeah, good. Now, a couple of people were saying that it seemed a little bit odd that Frodo, that Frodo's not more curious, doesn't ask. He's not like, hey, who's this Dunedain you're talking about, right? Who's your friend, Uncle Bilbo? I don't know. I think. Yeah. Again, explaining why Frodo doesn't ask about it, I'm not really, I mean, he doesn't seem to ask about it. It seems, based on what's going to start happening in the next paragraph, that is, Bilbo's going to be pumping him for news. So I think it could be quite as simple as Bilbo doesn't really let him get much of a word in edgewise, or, Bilbo kind of dominates the conversation after this. And yeah, Crownless, Frodo would probably assume that it's an elf he hasn't met. Why not? Right? First of all, he doesn't parse the name enough to figure out who it must be, but he surely recognizes that it's Elvish, right? So it's not like it's super suspicious. But in any case, yeah, it's also pretty clear that Bilbo is immediately going on with the conversation. So even that sentence, messengers were sent to find Bilbo's friend, though none knew where he was or why he had not been present at the feast, seems to me like a kind of, not necessarily some, I mean, you could almost one could almost think, just reading that sentence, that Bilbo and Frodo are sitting there quietly waiting as messengers are sent, right? And they're finding out, they're hearing back that nobody knows where he was and why he wasn't there at the feast. Probably that's not happening, right? That's something that maybe Frodo is peripherally aware of, that somebody is sent off, right? But he's focused on Bilbo. He's had, 5 minutes of conversation with Bilbo after being apart from him for 17 years. He's still really focused on Bilbo, and Bilbo's going to be asking questions and updating him about what's been going on with him, right? So, yeah. None knew where he was or why he had not been present at the feast. There's an irony here, I think, which only kind of comes out later. And Bilbo, it's going to come out explicitly when Strider shows up, but I think we can already begin to feel it approaching, right? And that is, Bilbo says he wasn't at the feast because he had more important things to do, right? And his more important things to do were sitting and thinking about this poem that he's going to recite later on. Strider is not at the feast because he actually has urgent business to do, which is actually urgent, which is both actually business and also actually urgent. And I think that he is going to tease Bilbo about the difference between their respective forms of business, which keep them away from feasts. Storied past, that's a great question, and I don't know. Do we understand, he asks, that many at Rivendell weren't at the feast, or that Aragorn really stuck out by not being there? My impression is the latter. We don't know for sure how many, is everybody there? Is it a feast just for the, the great and the good, Matt, as you said, or is everybody sort of expected? Is it a really communal thing there at Rivendell, and everyone is expected to be there? So the fact that Aragorn's not there is weird. I'm not 100% sure, of course. The impression that I get is the latter, because why he had not, the fact that nobody knows where he is or why he had not been present at the feast suggests that they find it, so they think there must be a reason, right? They're not being like, oh yeah, he wasn't around, was he? Right? Yeah, oh, that's right. Haven't seen him today. It seems to be implied that there should be a particular reason for him not to be there. And yes, Green Great Dragon, I agree. Earlier on, it was pointed out that Elrond's sons weren't there. Yes. Yeah. Yes, exactly. We know that they weren't there. So we know that there is not a 100% attendance, but again, I think they had the same business Aragorn had, right? So they were doing other things, not just they weren't showing up. Yeah. Yeah, and exactly, Storied Past. Those are the two things that I have no idea how to answer. How many elves actually live in Rivendell, and how many people are there at the feast? We know there are several tables, so I assume a fair number of people. Yeah. Where would he have sat at the feast? Would have been awkward. A little bit awkward in some ways. Yeah. I think that Arwen and Aragorn are definitely an open secret at this point. I don't think there's much secret about it. Certainly not in the family. It is quite plain that both, and we know that Elrond knows, and we know that her brothers know, right? What with the standard and everything. So yeah, I think Brilliant, yeah, it's only like the hobbits and the readers who don't know about Arwen and Aragorn. So yeah, Bricktails is suggesting that Elrond has said to Aragorn that you have to sit at the kids' table until you have the crown of Gondor and the scepter of Arnor, something like that. Something like that. Yes, the newcomer hobbits. Absolutely, I'm not including Bilbo in that. He obviously knows. And it's true that Tolkien didn't know until near the very end as well. Very, very true. But again, I think I don't think that there's any concealment of it. I think everybody in Rivendell knows what's going on with Arwen and Aragorn. I don't think it's a secret at all. But I do think that it certainly would have been an item of comment from Frodo, right? Would they have been seated together at the feast? I assume they would be seated together at the feast. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be. I don't think that, Elrond is saying you two are to have nothing to do with each other. I don't think that he's pulling a Father Francis on them, right? And saying, I want you to have no further contact with my daughter until after you have achieved the crown of Gondor and the scepter of Arnor. He's saying you can't marry until then. I will not give away my daughter to you. So he's saying they've chosen each other. They're betrothed to each other. But he's saying there's only one circumstance under which you can marry, and that is once he's king. Yeah. So yeah, no, exactly, Edith. That's precisely the situation there. Yeah, good. Yeah, exactly, Kate. He didn't, for instance, put Arwen up a tree and lock her there, right? There's precedent for that kind of thing, right? He doesn't. So yes, there's no. I mean, he kind of did stick her up a tree in the sense that he sent her to Lothlorien, but that's totally different. Yes, I mean there is. We know how Elvish fathers react when they are trying to forbid their daughters having anything to do with their scruffy-looking human suitors, right? And that has to do with incarceration and trees. So yeah, no, we do not see Elrond acting like Thingol here. Yeah. Anyway, and it certainly would have given the game away much earlier for Aragorn to have been at the feast, right? His position at the feast, he certainly would have been at the head table, and probably next to Arwen. And again, Frodo would be asking questions, right? So that seems to me to be Tolkien preserving the surprise for us for one more step here. Okay, let's see. I think that's all I wanted to emphasize here. But I think I'm going to stop there because we're starting to get late and it's field trip time. So I want to do our field trip now rather than starting another slide at this hour. Yeah, cool. Okay, so that was very good. Thanks for your help with our textual discussion here tonight. This was good, making strong progress now, working our way towards the poem. So that's good. So we'll have a little bit more discussion. We'll get to meet Strider again and do the whole reveal on the Dunedain thing. And then, of course, we will finally get to the poem. So thanks, everybody, for joining me for the discussion. Stick around for the field trip. I'm going to say goodbye to the folks on Twitter, as usual here. And to folks in the Talon, and we will be, and I'll be switching it, but I'll still be going on Twitch with our field trip. So thanks, everybody. All right.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Okay. All right. So we are headed back to Kellendim, and what we're wanting to explore was... So now, Valori, you were not here last field trip, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, no problem. So we're gonna head out to Kellendim and then head north from there. So you guys can all join us here. We're gonna explore the north central regions of the arid lowland place. We're moving from like the elvish side of things over to the dwarvish side of things, but not quite to the dwarves yet, because there are some very interesting ruins that I want to explore up there. In particular, we think we found, my theory last field trip was that we actually found a relic of first age humans.
Oh.
And not just your standard swirly pattern rocks like in the Barrow Downs and stuff. I don't mean relics of ancient humans who might have been from some indeterminate early time. I mean, like, men in the Silmarillion.
Like proper.
Theory. Proper
Gotcha.
first age men, yeah. Like, actual,
How can I be of service?
from a concrete time and place. Not just the
Interesting.
unknown ancestors of who knows whom.
Oh, so don't tell me those are the spooky boys up there near the spiders, right?
That's the area. That's the area, though I'm not convinced. Well, it's so let's see if we'll see if we can recreate this here.
Okay.
So we're meeting in Kellendim, and we're going to ride up the road here. All right. Okay. Let's see. Most
Yeah.
people arrive here with us now. All right.
Yeah, I think so.
So head back up the road. So the
I gotta.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No.
Just
Go ahead.
in relating to the reading tonight, it's always, I remember as a kid thinking Elrond was like, oh, cool, so mystical, so wise, so like, almost like Gandalf, but more serious. And then here he is just being a bro.
Yeah.
with Bilbo, and they got like this sort of Benedict Beatrice banter going on.
Yeah. No, I mean it's really classic. I mean Bilbo and Elrond do seem to talk at least like Bilbo and Gandalf talk.
Yeah.
If not like Frodo and Merry talk. And that's
Yeah,
seriously cool.
Yeah, it is cool, and it definitely shows a different side of Elrond, where he's not imposing. He's poking fun at the fact that Bilbo is passively boasting about how awesome he is by pretending, oh, I'm not all that, except I totally think I am.
Right.
And Elrond's like,
going
I'm
to say
calling
that
you
this
out.
poem I'm going to recite is awesome, but this poem I'm going to recite is pretty
Right,
awesome. Yeah.
is pretty awesome. Yeah, and Elrond's like, great, we're taking notes. I have my scorecard ready.
Yes,
And
exactly.
my list of words that Bilbo uses far too often, bingo card.
Right, and then of course it turns out to be a poem about Earendel on top of all of this. I mean,
Cheeky.
cheeky indeed, right? But again,
yeah.
it's funny because of course, that's the phrase that. Well, it's not going to be Aragorn; it will be Bilbo who will use that phrase, characterizing Aragorn's attitude. But still, the point is, we're set up for that, right? I mean, like that it is cheeky because that's like very much the relationship that they have. Tora Marthin is suggesting that Elrond and Bilbo tweet memes at each other.
Oh God,
yeah,
they sure would.
I'm
They
sure
sure
they
would.
would. Absolutely sure that they would.
They tag each other going, diss you, It's
Yeah.
like, but
Remember that all of the descriptions of Elrond, both the description of Elrond that we get in The Hobbit and the description of Elrond that we just got sitting at the table, emphasize the way in which he is this mixture of things, right? That he
he's
is
dichotomy.
like, yes, exactly. He is this dichotomy. And let's see, where's my pillar? Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. Down here.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is. Well, but I also like how it implies so much shared history already. We already have a joke about Bilbo falling asleep. We already have a joke about maybe Bilbo being too sensitive about criticism. We already have
Right.
this joke that, that about maybe Bilbo not being prepared or something like that. So, and the whole little, Jack Torrance, The Shining, how dare you interrupt me while I'm writing thing.
Right.
That they must have gone on a long time. It's just, it already implies they've had so much history.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's been living there for 17 years now, which, from Elrond's perspective might not be very much, but it certainly is from Bilbo's perspective. Anyway, yeah, no, I agree. And really kind of looking at that whole thing in that context is really important. But again, people tend to forget the other half of Elrond. Like, he's not only venerable, he's also kind. He is not just he's not just solemn. He's not just great and famous and ancient and wise. He's also fun. He's also friendly.
It wasn't aloof. It started off at this playful master bit.
Yes.
Doctor kind of thing. And then it turned into, hey, you.
Yeah. Okay, so this was where we kind of started last time. And we went up to the Ward Spire. Anyway, so which was totally dwarvish, by the way, the Ward Spire, totally dwarvish. And the town across the river that you can see from there, totally Arnorian, classic Arnorian. So the Dunedain had a little, and my theory about that was that was like a family manor, like it was not like a major city. It was a little, little like village.
Downton Abbey.
Yeah. Exactly. Little homely house on the river that was made by the Dunedain in the some of the Dunedain in
the summer yachting house.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This, however.
What is this?
Okay, so this was the theory. First of all, the first thing to notice about this is that it is an obelisk. This is not a ruin, right? This is not a pillar. This is not a piece of a house or a broken down bit of tower. This is an obelisk. This is a memorial, right? A marker or memorial of some point, of something, not a practical structure of any kind, right?
Yeah.
So who's making a memorial here? And I don't think it doesn't bear the marks of being obviously dwarvish. It doesn't bear the marks of being obviously elvish. So I'm thinking that it's human, especially since we have humans who obviously were here because we've got those burial grounds right over there that we can see, right?
Yeah.
Even though they don't have stonework like this, right?
Yeah.
So my theory was that this spot down in the southern area, because of, let's mapify again. So if we open the map and we expand the map, okay. So the Blue Mountains here are the southern part of the range of the Blue Mountains from the Silmarillion, and we know that that Lindon, where Gilgalad was, this last bit of Beleriand that's left here on the other side of the mountains, was part of Assyriand in the First Age. Back if you imagine the Silmarillion map. So that bit is like from the bottom right-hand corner of the Silmarillion map. Okay?
Yeah, this is the direction the men were coming from.
Exactly, because of course they cross over into Assyrian first when Finrod Felagund finds them, and they, of course, famously meet the unfriendship of the Green Elves, right? So my theory was, therefore, that this obelisk, that this place was the place where the men like the people of Marach and stuff came and camped here for a while before they crossed over the mountains.
Gotcha.
And they lived here for long enough to build burial grounds, right? But the burial grounds, as we'll see, let's go see the burial grounds. I'm going to jump off the cliff and into the water here.
Why you do that?
Sorry, that was an accident. But anyway, So what we saw when we were looking at we looked up at one of this gravesite over here, and we saw these like sort of peculiar standing stones, which don't look the same as like the Barrow Downs, right? None of this looks the same, and there's almost no markings at all, like sigils or symbols or any kind of pictorial representations on any of the clothing or armor or weapons of the dead in through here. And
doesn't mean there were never any.
No, it doesn't mean there weren't ever any. This one was the most interesting one that we found because it has I can't get up the hill. There we go. It has that white obelisk in the middle, right?
Yeah. Definitely imported.
Exactly. Whereas the rest of it is more native stone. So, but all of this looks very different from the Barrow Downs, say, right? We don't get any of those like swirly patterns, no carvings, no barrows even exactly.
This is a cairn.
Yes, this does appear to be a cairn, and we see even what looks like stone sarcophagi here. And there's this one weirdo fishhook symbol that I can't make much of.
Where?
On this side, the north side of the obelisk.
Oh, okay.
White obelisk here.
It doesn't look like our fish hooks from our Black Numenorians.
No, nothing like that. Now, notice this, which looks like white marble. The obelisk here is cut crudely. I mean, it's not very neat. The obelisk is certainly the green obelisk over there. Would seem to represent a higher level of technology than this white obelisk. But
of course, marble gets banged up so much too.
That's also true. It could be damaged. Exactly. It might have been neater at one point. In fact,
look
you could
how
argue,
neat the base is.
Yes, exactly. The base is very neat, and the sides are quite flat. So perhaps it is meant to just be broken off rather than crude in that sense.
Or the stone as it was is significant because that's how it was at some particular time when someone was struck down.
Perhaps.
Or this was, after something was struck by lightning, it was deemed sacred. So the rock itself was imported as a sacred item.
Sure.
And only a base was given to it to keep it from falling over.
Yeah, maybe. This natural stone, that is the stone which seems to be native to the area here, these aren't necessarily, maybe they're carved. Not sure if they're carved or not.
Yeah.
But anyway, this doesn't seem to be, other than a general star design, there doesn't seem to be much representative art here. But anyway, so I'm thinking it could be the same people did the obelisk and who did this, but that their funerary practices are different from their memorial practices over here. It is also possible that obelisk is raised at a later time by somebody else in order to commemorate the fact that this was their place. Like they know that this is the place of the humans because their tombs are here, right?
Yeah. Look how far some of these come down the slopes too. It does make me wonder if at one point they were standing up and then just gravity started to push them out.
Why they're tilted like that? Yes, there are.
Yeah.
They are standing stones all the way down the hill here.
But they're on a hill, which
Yes.
implies that after centuries or millennia, the gravity is going to do some work on them and sort of shift them
Is this a road?
down the hill. What road?
Is this no? I'm trying to see if this is a road that you're supposed to. It feels like more like a slalom course than it feels like a road.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. I just wanted to see if it was maybe an old road with standing stones on either side of it as a way up to the.
Like a guide marker kind of thing.
Okay. Oh, excellent. So Deathman is quoting some quest text. So there's the quest that sends you up to the white marble pillar there is you're supposed to be finding a sword, and the dead dude says, in ages past I honored my fallen companion with a sword placed at his grave amongst the mounds of the Edain. It may be, so they're called the Edain, which is interesting.
The Edain.
It may be
Yeah.
that the sword can yet be found in that place. It bears the motto Elvelon, or elf friend, in the tongue of men. Perhaps if you find the sword, it will convince young Kellerink not to spurn my gift, right? Okay. So, elf friend. Yeah, that is interesting. So that would seem to, well, I won't
So the
say.
snaky fishhook means elf friend?
No, not the snaky fishhook. The name of the sword means elf friend.
Oh, the name of the sword.
Could
okay.
the snaky fishhook mean it? Maybe, but I want to see what's over here on the next hill. Okay, so here I am.
Yeah.
Here's
Slytherin grave.
another big old standing stone.
Oh, yeah, here we go. Another white marble. Anything on this side? Nope.
Very smooth, though. This one is.
That one's not rough-hewed at all. And
It's
the
very
base
smooth,
is
but it's
covered
also
by...
not got corners or flat
Yeah?
sides. It's not.
Look, the base isn't carved. It's made by layered, almost stones arranged like bricks on this side.
Yeah, let's see. Okay, good. Trifle is giving us some more quest text from a different quest. My friend Galti doesn't believe me. He claims there are no Barrowites out among the old Edain mounds, but he's been no further than the mounds near Gondomar, and those don't seem to be haunted at all. It's only the mounds off a ways to the northeast. And later on, if whites stir the bones of the ancient Edain, then an evil has arisen in these mountains which we should all fear. Okay, so the ancient Edain. Yeah, that would seem to...
Yeah, wait till you get to some of the carvings on this side.
Right, because, okay, so now I know there's a ruin over there, which I'm keen to get to, but I want to just briefly look at the other grave spots here first.
Okay.
This one has another central pillar.
This one just has a flat, like, altar stone in the middle.
Okay, oh, look, and here's another white pillar, another white marble
Oh,
pillar.
yep.
Yeah.
So it seems to be the done thing.
Okay, and then
Yep,
over
there's the
here
snake
we
again.
have-
So that's not a fluke. That's the snake hook
Yeah.
thing. Intriguing.
Okay. And this looks... Well, it looks Arnorian. Doesn't look especially... Oh, where have we seen those dudes? We've seen these dudes
Where?
before.
Oh, you're at the ruins itself?
Yes, I'm at the ruins. I'm on the
Bear
eastern
Downs.
side of the ruins. These are like sarcophagi, aren't they? Where do we see these? We
It
see them in
looks
the
similar
Great
to
Barrow?
Barrow Dome. No, because those ones had beards. The ones at the Great Barrows had beards, and these are clean shaven.
I am sure
Up there.
we've seen these before.
I
North
think
Downs?
so.
Where in the
Maybe.
North Downs did we see these?
Is this Farnost? Did we have something like this in Farnost?
In the Halls of Night? Wait, I'm forgetting. Which ones were the Halls of Night?
So one of those big... Is that a skirmish?
In the, on the way to the North Downs from Estaldine. We didn't see anything like this up in the north of the Trollshaws, did we? In the, undead area.
Yeah, no, I don't think there was anything like this, because that was a leisure palace. It wasn't a burial ground.
Yeah. I'm not seeing... Have you seen any Arnorian stars? Oh, well, I guess we can get up there then. I just saw somebody ride out onto the steps. How do we get up? Around the back?
Yeah, around the back, yeah. Or we have to go up the hill. I forget which.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
there we go.
nope, here we go.
Plenty of room up the back. Excellent.
Up the hill.
Okay, so, and there is a keystone in that arch. Oh, no, it's broken off. It was not a star, though.
No, look, there's like some sort of holy relic over here. It looks like an ark.
They have an ark?
Yeah. Right where I'm at. Inside.
Oh,
And the
whoa.
yeah.
They do have an ark. Look at that.
La la la. Sorry, my brothers and I would sing that every time we watch Indiana Jones. We'd start singing ark music. I have a weird.
Oh, so by the way,
look like
O'Malley says that the thing on the white obelisk is not a snake; it's a plant. So it looks like a snake, but if you look closer, it's a tree or at least a branch. I can easily believe that.
Branch of a tree. Okay, like a tendril kind of thing. I'd have to look at it again,
something
but
vine-ish. Anyway, so I'm just looking at arches and trying to find anything because, up here on the keystones of arches are a place, of course, where we traditionally find stars. But this design looks so Arnorian. I mean, look at this. The arches, right? The arches and the brickwork.
Yes. It looks like what we've seen pretty much through all of Bree.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a little sigil at the top of these. Can't see what it is, though. I'm noticing three chisel marks on each side, too. Like, number 3 is important, or the number 6 is important.
Yeah. Yeah. Trifle, it does look like Esteldine. That's what I was thinking. Now, am I right in recalling that at Esteldine... No, there were stars there.
Yeah, there were.
There were stars there. So, well, here's the big question, which I'm having a hard time drawing conclusions about. And that is this a human ruin or not?
I think it's definitely human. What kind of human is what makes me curious, because I haven't seen any dwarven architecture that looks like this, but then we haven't really looked at dwarf architecture.
Not too much, but yeah, it doesn't look particularly dwarvish to me at all. The arc, I'm not too worried about the arc. Yeah, I'm not too worried about the arc here.
Cool.
It is cool, but it's also modern. I mean, that's clearly not ancient. I mean, somebody else came and put this arc here. So this is like Raiders of the Found Ark, really. Yeah. Yeah, no, that does not look ancient.
This is the warehouse they stuck it in.
Now that is particularly interesting. The swirlies there?
Yeah, very.
That's the most barrowed down looking thing we've seen here.
Yeah.
Are these what look like the plinths for statues, basically, or something? With no statues on?
It looked like the squat men down below us, the sort of sarcophagus guy or something like that. I'm noticing the same swirlies, and I just think it's really interesting, though, that even though it's the same design, the men looked so drastically different on those sarcophagi than they did in the Northern Downs, where they had more of the beardy Nordic bullet head helmet kind of look to it, while the ones down here are clean shaven and have different armor and different everything. So, which came first? But it's the same style.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, just looking at them again here. Oh, yeah, and you get the swirlies down there. Yep, you're right. And on their wrists.
But no beards and different helmets.
We didn't see them in Angmar, did we?
Not these.
It feels like ages since we abandoned Angmar, but...
Yeah, it does.
We'll go back someday, but...
I think those were very much the barrow down looking, though, because I do recall the sort of Celtic beard and hair. combo. I've never
Yeah.
seen him clean shaven. This is the only clean shaven one I've seen.
Yeah. It could be an older structure rebuilt and reused in a later age, Matt. That does seem possible. Especially since there do seem to be at least two different kinds of stone used here. So that would be consistent with that, you'd think?
Definitely feels like the sort of Brie architecture is the newer stuff that's built over the old stuff. Even if they're both crumbling, it implies they've both been here forever.
And it feels kind of Arnorian, but it's not exactly Arnorian.
Yeah, none of the Arnorian symbols, probably pre-Arnorian, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would think he would be pre-Arnor. But again, maybe if, as Matt was suggesting, it was sort of built back up again at a later time, even during Arnor, right, they might have sort of kept the original feel of it or something.
But why'd they eschew the star?
Don't know. You'd think they would put it on even if they were building it up after the fact, even if they were preserving some of the original elements.
They put the star on like they're getting paid every time they show up.
It really is everywhere. But if this was where... But this is small. This building is really kind of a tiny building.
Outpost?
Well, it's another thing. So when we're talking about the ancient Edine, right? If we're thinking about the ancient Edine, that is to say, the men when they were first coming west and before they crossed over the Blue Mountains, they did that in like large hordes, This building certainly wouldn't have housed them. It's way too small.
No. And why build over a burial site?
I'm thinking it was originally a burial place, maybe a more important burial place built up
maybe
on
some
this
kind of museum, like someone was visiting their ancestors and decided to put a building here to...
Well, that's exactly what I'm thinking as far as the later structure that would have been put up, right? So let's imagine the main brickwork and arches and all that stuff, right? Imagine this site without any of that, because that's what looks Arnorian. That's what looks like it's, Second Age.
Yeah.
Right? Or Third Age is what I mean. That's what looks Third Age. So let's imagine it without the Third Age stuff at all. What do we have here? We have this black rock platform, right? So this base here, which is clearly not part of the construction, but something the building was constructed around. This would have been here. That staircase wasn't here. This other thing wasn't here. So these tombs... These would have been tombs or sarcophagi placed up against the side of this platform, right?
It's almost like the guards watching their king.
Maybe. And then we go up on top of the platform, the big stone platform here. And what do we get? We get these things. Maybe also other sarcophagi, other memorials. We get this thing. Again, I'm not too convinced about the arc itself because that looks modern. But the structure around it is
the
clearly
housing around
old.
it.
Yeah, so the housing is...
An altar.
Yeah, so this altar was built up here on the flat. Those tombs or pedestals were built up here on the flat. I'm a little bit unclear about these. Yeah, a temple. This I could easily see. A temple with dead people buried in here or around. It's not just a mound like the other places, which you can see from here. Yeah. And yes, I do think that this stone is more like the stone that we see in some of the obelisks. Okay, so you've got this ancient, the remnants of this ancient temple, especially important burial ground, right? And then now it's the Third Age. Now you've got the Dunedain who have come back, and they find this place, and they say, we're going to build, I don't know what, a structure, a house, we're a hall. We're going to build a hall around this. What? To preserve, to commemorate this place that they would have perceived as an important or holy spot to their ancient ancestors. Right?
It was a temple. Yeah.
Yeah. Not like these, which is just a burial mound, right? Yeah. Burial mound or cairn. These they found around here in plenty too, but they would have noticed that there was this area back here was singled out in some way by the sarcophagi, by the altar, what seems clearly an altar on the inside.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was like an attempt to restore an old church that might have rotted away.
Now, this still doesn't explain why, if they were Numenorians, they didn't put stars up like they were going out of style. Exactly as you suggested. Could it post-date the original inhabitants but still predate the Third Age Numenorians? Maybe. I mean, we know so little about this region during that time, especially. Like during the Second Age.
Yeah. I don't know. It's almost like I think we'd have to go much further east to look at other man-made buildings to ascertain that.
Yeah. 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 Well, so I'm just thinking of, because even in the Second Age, thinking of the Second Age in this region, there are two choices, right? One would be Numenorians who had returned and were having bases along the coast, right? And this, of course, is very near to Linden, just upstream from Linden, so wouldn't be strange. And we saw what looked like the memorial. We were imagining is the memorial of where, where Elendil first landed. But the other option, of course, is that it's another, some of the non-Edain humans, right?
Yeah.
Exactly, Matt. The other men who predate the Numenorians and live on past their arrival. Yes, exactly. So there could have been... So actually, yeah. So it could be still a Third Age structure if these because now the non-Numenorians living here, again, looking at the big map, right?
Yeah.
We know about the non-Numenorians in Breland.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of examination of that. But there's a big difference between out here, back in the old days of pre-Civil War Arnor, the center of everything was up at Annúminas, up in the corner, right? So Breland was kind of the sticks, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was really kind of the middle of nowhere, whereas this area up here, just north of where Kilondon will later be built, and Thorin's Hall, is quite near to Linden, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got to think that there was, a lot of traffic to and fro between Linden and Annúminas here, that would have gone up the River Lune. So anyone who lived here would be in a different kind of relationship, it seems to me, with the Numenorians, with the Arnorians, I should say, even than the Brelanders were. And the Brelanders were all, engulfed, right, by Arnorian stuff. But again, Bree is sort of a bad data point in that way, because during the time of the Arnorian Civil Wars, Brioland was close to the epicenter, right, where the three primary Dunedain lands all met. So
yeah, suddenly they weren't the Styx anymore.
yeah, suddenly they are not the Styx anymore. As the theater shifts, the Arnorian theater shifts from Enuminus exclusively, not exclusively, but primarily, to Fornost and to the warring the warring factions. So,
It does make me wonder about the river trade here, but it also implies that any other civilizations that have been out here were built as temporary lodging places, some place that was either packed up or rotted away over the years, because the only building that has survived is this temple.
yeah, well, maybe. But see, I'm not sure I can imagine them just camping out here amongst the barrows of the ancient dead.
Well, they built an obelisk, too, to say, here I am, but...
Well, or to say, here they were, right?
Yeah.
So what if... What if they were Second Age men who got... What if they were Second Age men? Okay, so imagine when the Edain crossed the mountains into Assyria and encounter the unfriendship of the Green Elves. Some of them stay over here, right?
Sure.
So some of them stay over here, and that's who built the barrows and stuff. And that's who built this temple originally.
Yes.
But like their descendants stay over here in this region. In later years, their descendants would have... Now, by the Third Age, I'm thinking, by the Third Age, the descendants of those people would have been... Because they're kind of on, Arnorian... They're really close to the Arnorian main center here. I think that they would have been kind of absorbed into Arnor. At that point. But in the Second Age, they still could have been independent but influenced by the Dunedain, right? Because they would not have been far from places where the Dunedain would have come, where the Númenóreans would have come, so they could have built this. Because the lack of stars really leads me to think it can't be an actual Arnorian construction. And I can't see how something like this would have been built here in the Third Age and have no affiliation with Arnor, even if they were local. Because again, in Bree, right, we see the Arnorian star all over Bree, not in the native architecture, but in the rest of the architecture, which is there, right?
Yeah.
And imposed on it. And I would have expected to see a similar thing, a distinctly Númenórean layer here, unless there's a reason why there wasn't, right? Unless there's a reason why, because the Arnorians never really lived here, but there was a population here in the Second Age.
It's just interesting. We haven't seen any of their dwellings.
Yeah. No, we've seen very little in the way of ruins. Now, how close are we?
Well, I guess we'll have to find out with...
Yeah.
Find out next week if we can find any of their settlements.
Yes. We'll continue heading out towards Gondomar next time, but this was an intriguing little ruin this week that we were exploring.
I think we found a pilgrimage site.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. All right. Well, we should let everybody go. It's getting late. Yep. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. Thanks, Valoria, as always, for your assistance here. And
great to be back.
Yeah, we will see everybody next week. Should be back, actually, for some time, I think, through September, I believe. So, anyway.
God willing.
Yeah, God, exactly. Exactly. So, thanks, everybody, and we'll see you again next week. Good night now.
Good night.
Thanks for joining me on this epic exploration of The Lord of the Rings and of Standing Stone's video adaptation of Tolkien's story. If you are having even half the fun I'm having on this journey, I hope you will consider supporting the project by donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.